Greetings, everyone. This week I was going to review Sonic Team's unique firefighting title, Burning Rangers, for the Sega Saturn, but that didn't quite happen. And this is all for a litany of incredibly technical reasons, but that got me thinking, hey, I'm a hardware head at heart. Let's do something a bit out of the ordinary and talk about a console rather than a game. And what console more appropriate and bizarre than the mainstream chimera itself, the Sega Saturn? So with that in mind, welcome everyone to our first Snek Tech, where the hipster Snek talks about tech without getting too technical. I'll be honest, my history with the Saturn is a recent love affair, and it was governed under the sobriety that is adulthood and having to pay for my own electronic entertainment. I never actually owned one, and even though I'd love to someday, I don't, and I also don't own a TV that could even hook up to it at present. I haven't seen a CRT TV in some 10-12 years. However, I did play at several demo stands of various retail outlets, and I was impressed by the trial version of Nights into Dreams that each of them had. Rumor has it Shigeru Miyamoto himself, when pressed for which franchise he wished he had created, supposedly named Nights as the one. That is high praise right there, but what made the Saturn tick, and what made it not sell? That's what we're here to talk about. To begin, saying the Saturn was an out-and-out flop just because it sold poorly here in the United States is kind of like saying that Garth Brooks wasn't a hit because he didn't chart very well in Saudi Arabia. It's a little bit more complicated than that. The Saturn sold decently well in Japan from its debut in 1994 up to its final discontinuation in the year 2000, though in the English-speaking world it actually died as early as 1998. The Saturn, with its rather devastating asking price tag of $400 USD, was ultimately sunk by the better-selling Nintendo 64, which demanded half that price upon launch, and the Sony PlayStation, which asked for just $300. It got shot in the arm in the land of the rising sun, however, with the advent of pseudo-mascot Segata Sanshiro, portrayed by tokusatsu legend Hiroshi Fujioka, actor who portrayed Kamen Rider 1. However, even that wasn't enough to save it, and the console only managed 9.26 million units sold worldwide, condemning the console to be labeled a commercial failure. These failures are often attributed to wild variances in game quality across titles, Sega of America's strange marketing tactics of the day, and a strong lack of third-party support. But really, what caused this strange black box, or white box if you have a Saturn from Japan, to be so costly? And what prevented those third parties from taking an interest? Well, let's look at what's under the hood. For starters, it had 2 CPUs and 8 separate processors. 8 of them. Let's look at why it had to be set up this way. To start, the CPU is listed as 2 copies of the Hitachi Super H2, a 32-bit chipset that Sega must have liked a lot because it also shows up in the 32X add-on as well. In fact, the successor chip, the SH4, was used as the CPU of the Sega Dreamcast just a few years later, so Sega must have had a lot of faith in Hitachi's chips. And for their time, the SH2 CPUs were impressive. If Wikipedia is to be believed, they were even used in car engines and were considered quite reliable. Official sources from Sega clarify that they were chosen due to their low cost and the ability for a pair to handle more demanding 3D rendering than a single CPU might be able to take. Which is weird, as they went on to say that same year the 32X add-on and standalone, ultimately canned in the latter case, were the 32-bit console for gamers on a budget, and it excused the price of the Saturn. That doesn't really make sense to me. Actually, let's sidestep the tech for just a bit because there's a lot of politics that came about during the console's development, with Sega of America apparently protesting most of the major decisions that were made during its inception. Yeah, during this time, Sega of America and Sega of Japan were the left and right hands that were refusing to speak to one another, which is why the Western Saturn was shiny and black, and the Japanese Saturn was white and had colorful buttons. Further, tensions were being sparked because, here's a fun bit of trivia for you, Sega was an American corporation that began its operations in Hawaii. Its Japanese branch soon took over and caused some level of resentment overseas. According to sources I've been able to find, there were several instances the two halves of the company just bickered over just about every aspect of the development cycle, and the Japanese branch always won in each of these shouting matches. Okay, we'll get back to that in just a sec, but for now, let's step back to tech. We'll cover some more of the controversies later on. As said, the Saturn boasted 2 CPUs which oversaw the total workload and 8 processors, which is still insane. It had a dedicated processor from Motorola just for sound control and another from Yamaha for sound processing. Cog would be able to explain that better than me, but to give some numbers and then a summary, This thing could belt out 32 sound channels at a max rate of 44.1 kHz. That's pretty solid stuff. Next up, the Saturn also had two processors dedicated just for video rendering. Do I even need to say how crazy that is? Yes, that is a common practice nowadays on people who custom order their PC towers, but at the time this was not normal by any stretch. The first, designated VD1, handled textures and polygons, and the second, VD2, processed backgrounds. A specific Hitachi SH1 series processor handled the double-speed CD-ROM tray, which I must confess is a sentence that I never thought I'd say out loud. There was a system control unit acting as a co-pilot to the main two CPUs, and that's all pretty nuts. More in the realm of realism was the 16 MB of RAM and the 12 additional MB of video RAM. Peppered in are some bundles for sound and other processes, and a RAM expansion bay. And with all this, you're seeing a system that has a lot of stuff bolted onto it, all because Sega was desperate to stick to the bleeding edge of technology, despite the fact that this was the mid-90s and a period of rapid technological evolution. To give you just one example that absolutely floored me, the faithful port of the arcade fighting title Virtua Fighter, which was bundled with all Saturns, ended up using one CPU for each player so they could maintain the native game speed. That's crazy. And I'm not gonna lie, gang, those specs are impressive. And for a mid-90s console, no wonder this thing was gonna cost you 400 big ones. But problems then arose. Mostly in that third parties weren't interested in dedicating enormous tracts of time to figuring out how this monstrous architecture was supposed to work. So most of the games the Saturn got as third-party titles were more or less limited to PlayStation 1 ports, not helping matters as a launch that was, at best, incompetent. Not only did the 32X add-on cannibalize what could have been potential sales, but when the Saturn hit Western shores, they did the announcement at E3 1995 declaring that 30,000 units had already hit certain select shelves. This caused massive retailer backlash, including KB Toys, which still existed at the time, dropping Sega from their lineup in their entirety. And just when Sega thought that demonstration couldn't possibly have gone worse, Olaf Olafsson, yes, that is his name, head of Sony Computer Entertainment America, mic dropped them by coming up saying only the words $299 and then walking off stage. The damage was done. The Saturn was soon overtaken by the N64 and the Sony PlayStation the First. Not helping was that the killer app for the Saturn was Nights into Dreams, a game few people remember even exists, and seemingly like other Saturn titles, Sega seems very intent on forgetting that it ever happened. To prattle off just a few examples of Saturn syndrome, as I have taken to calling it, Nights only ever got one sequel on the Wii and no one but me ever played it, and it got a terrible quality PC port. Burning Rangers didn't even get that, being some background music for Phantasy Star Online 2 special events. And poor Panzer Dragoon. Notably absent from the Saturn's lineup was Sega's own mascot, which really didn't help their case. The only Sonic game that we know was underway was named Sonic Xtreme, and it was ultimately cancelled for reasons that shall presumably remain a mystery for all time. It's ultimately a story of hubris. Icarus making his wax wings and taking to the sky, only to fly too close to the sun and be sent plummeting to the cruel ground below, all the while his father looking on in dismay. And that's kind of a shame. The Saturn is fascinating for its bizarre and labyrinthine features. It's a work of art as well as being a piece of hardware, and like many works of art, it really wasn't understood in its time. Of the 1100-ish games the Saturn got, the vast majority never even left Japan. To say nothing of the fact that 99% never got a port or any kind of meaningful follow-up. Sega seems to be desperately pretending that these games just never existed or that the Saturn wasn't a part of their history, which I feel is a disservice to us all. How about a Panzer Dragoon 2? Maybe an HD remake of Burning Rangers? Shining Force 3? I guess only time will tell. But for now, that closes the book on this piece of Snek Tech. This has been the Hipster Snek. I hope you liked this experimental episode, and if you did, tap that like button below to let me know. If you want more content every week, tap the subscribe and bell icon too. Leave a comment down below there to let me know what your favorite Saturn game was, if any. You can follow me on the Twitter or even on Subscribestar to help me facilitate ever more complex reviews in the future. Join me here every week for more obscure reviews, indie excellence, and more. And I'll see you there. Hey everyone, this is the Hipster Snek. I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention that I'm holding a bit of a contest. You see, the channel is rapidly approaching 100 subscribers, which is a milestone I never dreamed I would hit within the first year of the channel's activity. That in mind, I am opening a poll both on my YouTube comment section under the page itself and on the Twitter at HipsterSnek, where you can vote for a game you want me to review for the 100 subscriber special. The only limitation is it has to be something that I have a means of playing, and it can't be something that gets me banned off YouTube for having played it. That said, go wild. Whatever game you want me to cover for the 100 sub special, I will do when that time comes. So be sure to leave your vote either in the comment section on my YouTube channel or on the pinned tweet at HipsterSnek. When the subtotal crests 100, that will be the time that video is the next to go live. That'll give you something to look forward to, and I will see you there.